And that's a great segue to the question that Mr. Walter asked us. Well, we talked about advertisements, and we know that no blind ads are permitted. We know that it is the responsibility of the broker in charge to ensure that their brokers are complying with their advertising rules. So once we know they're complying with the advertising rule and we have a copy of their advertisement, how long must we keep that advertisement? So let's look at records. You're responsible as a BIC for retaining all files, making sure that the trust account is in balance, and transaction files. So our objectives for this section is we're going to define the BIC's responsibility for record retention and assist you in developing policies to make sure that your firm is in compliance. So the rule that determines record retention and the BIC's duties, again, is 58A0110G5 that talks about the BIC has the responsibility to retain records, and 0108 is the record retention rule that tells you exactly what needs to be kept and how long those documents should be kept. So when do we start the clock? What do we retain? What is the requirement for the availability of the records if the commission happens to come by and do a spot audit or you are the subject of an investigation? When the broker must provide forms to the company or the firm in which they are affiliated with. So all of these are specifically outlined in the record retention rule. So let's look at it. All of you have heard that the commission can come to your location of business without prior notice. Everyone knows that, correct? You do know that if you're not there, they still can come and ask where you are, or they may even wait until you return. Okay? So what I want you to understand is if you have the responsibility as a broker in charge to retain the records, make sure you retain the records. Make sure they are readily available without prior notice. Without prior notice. What must you keep? You must keep offers, contracts, agency agreements, disclosures, advertisements, sketches, anything that relates to the transaction in which you are dealing with, you need to keep. Example. How many of you correspond with your clients via text a lot? I think a great majority of you do. Should you keep those text messages? Yes. Absolutely. They're related to that transaction. How do you keep those text messages are up to you. I don't know if you're going to download them or screenshot it or use an app that converts your text to email. There are a lot of things out there available for you to ensure that you keep those text messages. Along the same lines, your email communication with client, you should keep your email communications as well. Whether or not you set up a client folder for each client in your Gmail or whatever email handle you decide to use. And then I have some brokers say, well, Kizzy, what do you want me to do if we're talking on the phone all the time? I'm like, oh my God, you actually talk to people still? But if you're talking on the phone all the time, that's great. However, you should follow up that phone call with an email or some type of text message communication confirming the dialogue so there is no confusion. So again, if you are having those telephone calls and those telephonic communication, follow up with the email, keep that email as your record. You will be amazed at the number of complaints that come through where brokers are equipped with their defense because they have documentation to prove their side. So we know sketches, records, advertisements, text messages, email communication, all of those things that relate to the transaction have to be retained. So when does the clock start ticking on a sales transaction? You must retain records 3 years after the closing or consummation of the sale, termination of the agency agreement, or disbursement of trust money, whichever happens last. So whichever happens last is when you start the clock ticking for saving those documents. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. So I sake of protecting my assets, or is that something that she's there?
All right, thank you, Ms. Lisa. Ms. Lisa says she keeps multiple offers as well. Is that protecting my assets? Am I going above and beyond? You should keep all offers. All offers, not just the one that was accepted.
And same on like offers we've made that were not accepted by.
Exactly. That, yes, keep all offers. All documentation should be kept. So again, the sales transaction, the clock stops ticking at the consummation of the sale, disbursement of the trust money, or the termination of the agency agreement, whichever happens last. All right, so let's look at a lease transaction. So you must retain records for 3 years after the termination of the tenancy and disbursement of the tenant security deposit. So termination of the tenancy and the disbursement of the tenant security deposit. That's when the clock starts ticking. Brokers shall provide their records to the firm within 3 days of receipt. So this is according to commission rule, license law. Brokers must supply their firms with their records 3 days upon receipt. As a broker in charge, you can make the firm's policy more restrictive and say, hey, I want everything within 24 hours. Or you can say, I want everything within 3 days. It does not say 3 business days, 3 calendar days. So if you enter into a listing agreement on Friday, then when do we need to have that listing agreement submitted to that firm for their records? By Monday, whatever time you entered into that leasing agreement by. So it's 3 days. So as a broker in charge, you determine how you want to be the recipient of the emails or the text messages or whatever documents that they must collect. The law says it has to be submitted to the firm, though, within 3 days of receipt. Any questions or comments so far? All right, so what are some of your suggestions about keeping text messages or emails? Ms. Chris?
The easiest thing I do with, I do the download and the text, I just download those into a Word document. But with emails, I found out that just Google, I use the Google a Gmail account, and I can just archive all of those email conversations, and I put them on my electronic files for each client, for each transaction. And it's just really easy, it doesn't take much time.
All right, thank you. So Ms. Chris says she just downloads her text messages and she synchronizes her email and archives all things and places them inside the client's folder in that particular transaction. Thank you. Anyone else? Is there anyone that keeps hard copies still at their firm? Hard copies. So I do run into brokers that say, you know what, I don't trust the cloud. I use the cloud, but I have a backup to the backup. And that is okay for you to do that as well. Again, you just must comply with the rule. How you comply with it is totally up to you and whatever method works for you. Ms. Tracy, you got a comment?
No, I print, like what she was saying, I'll do just screenshots of text messages, but I print all the emails out too, and I load them into my .loop as like just a document. So I've never gotten a call from you guys as far as a complaint or anything, but that way if you do, I mean, everything is there that you need. It's just easier to keep up with.
All right, and Ms. Tracy basically said thank you. She keeps up with everything.
Yeah.
All right, any questions about records? So what did we learn? Quick review. Records, 588010 says we must retain them for 3 years. And in a sales transaction, the clock starts ticking after the consummation of the transaction or the closing. What else?
Agency dissolution.
Termination of agency agreement and or disbursement of trust money. In a lease transaction, the clock starts ticking after the end of the lease and settlement of the account or releasing of the tenant security deposit. As a broker, you are responsible for submitting documents to your firm within how many days of receipt? 3 days, tops. However, if you are a broker in charge, you can make that more restricted, not less restricted, because you still have to comply with law. That was the quickest stop on our journey thus far, wasn't it? All right, so now we're going to get into, as someone used earlier, the meat and potatoes. So here, I usually have a lot of questions about the supervision of provisional brokers, and then you really get to see how brokers feel about provisional brokers out here in the industry. And so we know that Betty Big now has decided that she has affiliated Broker Bill. Broker Bill is a full broker. So she is aware of the responsibilities to make sure he complies with agency, that he submits appropriate advertisements, that he remains actively licensed. And she said, well, I got Broker Bill down pat. Maybe I have the ability to bring on a provisional broker to assist me as well. So there are some different duties and responsibilities as a broker in charge when you have a provisional broker in your firm or working with you in your sole proprietorship. So Betty takes on Pat and she realizes there are a lot more things that she needs to do to be able to supervise provisional broker Pat. So the objectives for this stop of our journey, you need to be able to describe what it looks like for a broker in charge to supervise a provisional broker. Explain how provisional brokers are actually compensated and develop policies to assure that you can appropriately supervise an affiliated provisional broker. The rule that pertains with supervision of a provisional broker is 58A0506. That explains that a provisional broker's status when they are first licensed is inactive. The only way they can get active status is if they affiliate with the broker in charge. They can only have one BIC at a time. So a provisional broker can only have one BIC at a time. We mentioned yesterday that as a full broker, you guys can be duly affiliated with as many firms as you so choose. However, that provisional broker, one firm, one BIC. How do we notify the commission that we are affiliating a provisional broker? We'll go over that process. Supervision is required. That's not an elective choice. You must supervise this provisional broker. And what happens when you find out that, you know what, I'm just not cut out for supervising a provisional broker. It's just too much for me. What is the process to terminate their affiliation? So 58A0506 goes through the whole process of affiliating a provisional broker. Once you affiliate that provisional broker, the duties that are required of you as a BIC, and then what if you realize that, hey, you know, I'm not cut from that cloth, and maybe we should terminate this affiliation. What's the process there? One thing we realized during this leg of the journey is if you terminate the affiliation of a provisional broker, that provisional broker is now going to become what? Inactive, because that provisional broker needs a BIC to remain their active status. All right, so provisional brokers must have a BIC to be active, and they can only affiliate with one BIC at a time. So how do we affiliate that provisional broker? We complete the license activation and affiliation form we learned so much about yesterday, 2.08. And that's on the commission's website under licensee. Well, first you go to forms, and then you go to licensee, and then you'll see license activation and broker affiliation form 2.08. And then down the line, if you feel like that relationship is not working out, then the termination of affiliation form is 2.13. Termination of affiliation is 2.13. So all BICs must supervise the provisional broker to reasonably assure that that individual is practicing brokerage that is complying with North Carolina real estate license law and commission rules. You get the concept?
Yes.
So a provisional broker has a little bit more responsibility for you to supervise them than a full broker. So that song was really significant because you need to know when they have listing presentation appointments. You need to know who they're communicating with because they are just newly licensed. and they are not familiar with a lot of the laws and concepts, although they learned them in pre-licensing, they need to learn the industry. So you're going to have to take a little bit more time and effort to ensure that they are complying with everything they're supposed to do. So what criteria does the commission use to determine whether or not a broker in charge is supervising that provisional broker? Anyone have any idea? Oh, great. Thank you, Miss Sierra. Did I say that right today? Oh, yes. Thank you. All right. So she said, how often is the BIC and the provisional broker communicating? Great response. Thank you. Anyone else?
You think the broker would do everything to review everything the provisional broker does before it goes to a prospective client or someone?
Thank you, Ms. Manna, for your comment. Ms. Manna said you would think that the broker in charge would review everything that the provisional broker does before it gets to the client. Any other comments? All right, so at the commission, we look at, is the BIC available to supervise the provisional broker? And is the provisional broker available to be supervised? So it goes back to what Sierra said. We're looking at the communication between the BIC and the provisional broker. We're looking at how many times you guys had face-to-face meetings. Don't have to be formal. Was it at a coffee shop? Was it at Starbucks? Email communication. How often are you bringing them in under your wing? Are you offering any sales presentation meetings or any training sessions for them? Are you assisting them with locating professional development courses or more specialty courses for them to take so they can become more knowledgeable and experienced in the field as well? So is the BIC available? And is the PV available? And what other resources are you providing for them? As a BIC, again, we already stated that you have the ability to determine the firm's policies. So as a BIC, you can ascertain and determine, okay, if you're a provisional broker, your first 3 transactions must be approved by me before they're consummated. All listing presentations for the first 6 months, I must accompany you on. Whatever restrictions you put in place on that provisional broker under your firm is totally up to you. Again, what you put in place, the commission will look at to see if you're providing that supervision of that provisional broker. So make sure it is written. It is written. You have office policies written for your supervision. Assure that the provisional broker actually knows what your policies are. I think I gave you an example yesterday that I was in one course that I was teaching and the broker told me they never met the broker in charge. So make sure the provisional broker actually know who their broker in charge is and not just their government name. That they can actually put a face to the name, they can actually reach out and touch them if they so choose. And by the way, that wasn't a provisional broker in my course, that was a full broker who didn't know who their broker in charge was. But I'm sure there's some PVs out there that don't know who their BICs are either. So keep an archive of policy communications and updates. So as technology changes, as the brokerage climate changes, you guys are going to adapt your firm policies to reflect that. So just make sure you archive any old policies that your firm has, that there's a place that you can go and look at them. And also you're going to keep your new policies as well. So don't destroy anything. Yes, Mr. Sharu?
So does the broker in charge has to be personally involved in the communication, or it can depute other people to coordinate whatever processes or policies that it put in place?
Thank you for your question, and we're actually going to get to that. So Mr. Sharu says, well, does the broker in charge actually have to be the one that's communicating with the provisional broker, or can he assign that task to another, another broker in his particular firm to do that? As a broker in charge, you do have the right to delegate some duties out. However, semicolon, you are still responsible for the supervision of that provisional broker and those other brokers as well.
Well, you mentioned delegation to the other brokers. Can it be just admin staff instead?
Communication with other brokers and the provisional broker just communicate with admin staff?
Yeah.
Is admin staff a broker in charge? No. Now, they're gonna have to communicate with admin staff, but you cannot say admin staff is responsible for making sure that this provisional broker is complying with all license law and commission rules. That's the broker in charge's responsibility according to 58A0110G5. All right. All right, so does the BIC provide ongoing quality training and share new regulatory information to that provisional broker? So I gave you some examples of this previously. A lot of you told me that you have sales presentation meetings, and a lot of firms now, which I love, have like training sessions, or they'll give you the ability to take an update course at the firm or general electives, but you need some training programs in place to make sure that your provisional brokers are equipped with everything they need to know. When policy changes and rule changes at the commission, how are you making them aware? The commission will look to see that as well. We want to know, how are you disseminating that new regulatory information to your provisional brokers? Because July 1st comes around every year and some law or rule is going to change. So it's nothing for us to hear at the commission, how long has that been in place, that law? I didn't know it was out there. Although it's on a hyperlink on the website, although it's in the bulletin, the broker in charges has that responsibility to make sure that new information is getting out there to their agents. Any questions so far? If the BIC has delegated supervisory duties to an affiliated broker, that BIC needs to make sure that the broker in which they are delegating those duties to is a veteran broker, is experienced, they trust their judgment, they trust their knowledge. However, you are still responsible for that supervision that full broker is providing to that provisional broker. So you remember the example we had yesterday of the broker and the broker login, the broker in charge login, and he had 548 licensees? That is an example of a BIC having probably someone in that office being responsible for 10 or 20 agents under their wing. However, that broker in charge is still responsible for all 548 of those licensees. So you can delegate duties and you can say, you look after David, you look after Sierra. However, what is the policy that you guys put in place to ensure that Kizzy is looking after David, Sierra? Kizzy is doing what she said she was going to do first and foremost, and she's disseminating correct information as well. Because Mr. Sharu, we are all up under you and your license number. So you have to be prudent and you have to be wise with whoever you give that delegation of duties to. Remember, BICs can delegate authority but not responsibility. Not responsibility. You are still responsible for those brokers. So it might not be feasible if you're a broker in charge and meet with every single broker every single day. But are you available when they text you or they email you? Are you responding back to them? When they call you, are you calling them back? Are you picking up the phone? Or are you a ghost broker in charge? Okay? So you have to make sure you are available and that they are available to be assisted. That is the criteria that the commission uses. You guys ready for a real life example? You guys would like me to be woken up just a little bit. I think this is to get some conversation started. Okay, before my example, go ahead, sir, Mr. Sherwood.
Yes, can you have a hierarchy of brokerage charges? For example, if I'm a broker in charge in Raleigh, and I have another location in Cali where there's another broker in charge that has been assigned. But it's under the same firm, the broker in charge in Cali now is a broker under my affiliation in Raleigh.
Okay, so that's a firm policy. That's a firm policy of who's affiliated with who.
But ultimately, he would be responsible.
Yeah, whoever that broker in charge is of that Raleigh location is responsible for anyone who's affiliated up under him.
including the broker in charge of cash.
If he is affiliated with you, you are responsible. And you know, one thing I like to tell other brokers as well, everyone is not going to be a broker in charge. Yes, the broker in charge has a lot of responsibility for brokers, but as brokers, you guys should ask your broker in charge, well, hey, you harping on me about my continuing education, did you complete yours? Did you? Because what happens if they didn't? You all go down. So there should be some checks and balances system in place as well, where the brokers check in on their brokers in charge to make sure that they are actually complying with license law and commission rule 2. But yes, the ultimate answer is the broker in charge is responsible for whoever is up under their particular affiliation. All right, so let's have a town hall discussion. Real life example, when I was doing research for the update course, it takes me approximately 5 months to write the update course. That is all I do for 5 months. Research, 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 and write. It's fun. It is. All right, so as I was researching, I found this case, and this case was in North Carolina, unfortunately. And the case was, we had a broker in charge who lived 400 miles from the firm in which they were a broker in charge. 400 miles, okay? And at the firm in which they were the broker in charge, there was a provisional broker that was essentially running the office. So the broker in charge was emailing with the provisional broker, not consistently, but you know, checking in every so often. Found out later during the course of my research, the provisional broker was compensated from an outside party for the transaction that just had, finished. The broker in charge never went to the office that was 400 miles away. Do you believe in that situation that broker in charge was supervising that provisional broker and that provisional broker activity? In that situation, do you believe there is something that could have been done differently to ensure that broker in charge actually supervised that PB? I see a lot of head shakes. What could have been done differently? All right, Mr. Chris says daily meetings on the telephone.
Or FaceTime.
Or FaceTime or Skype. Thank you, Mr. Chris. Anyone else? Mr. Chad.
Bi-weekly in-person meetings at the
Mr. Chad said bi-weekly in-person meetings at the minimum. Thank you for your comment. Anyone else? All right. Ms. Courtney said thank you. Not allowing a provisional broker to just run the real estate firm. Absolutely. How many of you think it is possible for a broker in charge to live so far away from the firm in which they are affiliated with? Raise your hand if you say yes. Raise them high, don't be ashamed. The broker in charge can live 400 miles away from the firm in which they are the broker in charge. How many of you believe that that is possible? Does anyone want to tell me that it is possible? Give me your argument.
I can say that my firm is a virtual firm, so we live all over, and so there's not, we have an office we're not able to come to. My broker in charge might not be 5 miles from me, for sure. 35 miles from me, 45 miles from me.
All right, thank you, Ms. Lisa, for your comment. Ms. Lisa says, well, I work for a virtual firm, and so when I go into the office, my broker in charge is not there. So, Ms. Lisa, is your broker in charge readily available to assist you if questions arise and you need help?
Oh, absolutely. We have a whole virtual world I go to when I go to the office in the world. We're just not physically together. If that makes sense.
Okay.
Your EXP.
Oh, let's not call out any names, please. Thank you. ABC Realty.
Sorry.
XYZ.
Thank you. XYZ. So she participates in the virtual world with her broker in charge. Mr. Armand, I saw your head, sir.
I did it for 10 years from Atlanta, North Myrtle Beach. I had 5 people working for me, and we had no problem. We were always on the phone. I was reviewing their contracts before they went in. But I did stuff that I should have done to make sure they were doing what they were supposed to do.
All
I'll
right.
help them out with anything that they needed. I'd even negotiate it for them.
Thank you, Mr. Armand. Mr. Armand said it went great for 5 years from Atlanta to Myrtle Beach, and he made sure that he was readily available to assist the brokers that were affiliated with him. How many of you believe that this is not plausible, that it is not possible? All right, Ms. Hope, tell me why.
I just feel that, as a provisional broker, you need to be working right under the thumb of that broker in charge. And I've seen, from personal experience, I've had a broker in charge that is listed as a broker in charge, and is never in the office. So I think that even, and I would constantly reach out to her via, text or email, but I think that as a provisional broker, you really don't know what you're doing. This is all brand new, and you've got to have that personal relationship with that broker in charge, that one-on-one. I just don't think that's a thing that you can do when you're 500 miles away.
Well, in South Carolina, you don't have to be a provisional broker. You're a sales agent, so.
All right, thank you for your comment, Ms. Hope and Mr. Armand. But Mr. Armand, this is North Carolina.
I know, it's totally different.
All right, so our laws are a little bit differently than South Carolina. But Ms. Hope stated that she believes the provisional broker should be under the thumb of the broker in charge and have that interpersonal relationship to make sure that they are adequately equipped with handling license law and commission rules. I saw Mr. Chad, and then we're going to have Mr. John and Ms. Lisa.
So my thing is, I'm with Hope. How can you supervise when they're going to be a listing agreement if they're measuring a house? They don't know anything about what they're doing. I just don't think it's feasible.
Okay, thank you for your comment, Mr. Chad. Mr. Chad doesn't think it's feasible. Mr. John?
I would say it is feasible with the technology that we have today, but we've already heard some examples of people being able to supervise remotely or from a faraway distance. If you have the ability to, like we said, delegate the authority but not the responsibility, if you have a PV at an office, you can put an experienced agent to do that one-on-one where they're under the thumb working side by side with them to help with them, and then the broker in charge still has the ability to electronically review contracts, making sure that listings are accurate. You can set up a policy that before things happen, you can review things electronically, FaceTime, Skype, text, call, it all works, it's instant, we can be in touch pretty readily. So we don't have that in our office. I just think that it's something that is very possible to do with the technology that is available to us.
All right, thank you, Mr. John. Mr. John says he believes it is possible as long as you set up the appropriate procedures and policies in place to have a checks and balance system. And most importantly, what he said, the broker in charge has to be available to review anything that PB is doing. One last comment about this, Ms. Lisa?
That was exactly what I was gonna say, those are the layers in their place.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Lisa. She said there just must be different layers in place. What I would caution you guys, if you are working in a firm where the broker in charge is not on site, or the broker in charge lives miles away and doesn't physically come into the office, you don't want to be the test case at the commission. And so what you want to ensure is that you can prove that that broker in charge is available to assist you and you are readily available to be assisted. So there definitely has to be parameters, there has to be layers put in place for that broker in charge to affiliate with those full brokers and make sure that they are appropriate